Howdy, Brother John coming to you from Ennis, Texas. It is August 12th at 5:44 a.m. This is fundraising for OSC OSA OSU Part C. I'm going to assume that you have already watched Part A and B. It'll make sense in that context. Without that, I don't know. Good luck. So some of these are longer, some of these are shorter. I'm trying to keep them kind of moderate in length. So as I'd indicated, I came to faith alone in Christ alone in 23 years old, January 16, 1977, Houston, Texas. It was Bracewell Assembly God Church. There's a whole story about that, the details I'm trying to leave out at this time. But basically, I was just told, well, come back to church. We have the doors open Sunday morning and Sunday evening and Wednesday evening. The place is full Sunday mornings, about a third of people come back in the evening on Sunday, and a third come back on Wednesday. And then I was listening, as indicated before, Christian radio all the time. I wasn't real rich. At those days, so internet 77, obviously, it didn't come in until the late 90s. So the only way to study more was you had to buy books, and they were kind of big and they're kind of expensive. I do remember getting the Strong's Strong's Concordance, Comprehensive, Complete, Exhaustive, big old book, good golly. I would have to buy separately a Bible Atlas or Bible Dictionary or commentaries or all those things you can get all that for free these days. And by the way, the place I highly recommend that I like, there are 3 or 4 major places for Bible studies. One I like is BibleHub.org. I like that one the best. Use that all the time. So I was thrown into this, having no church background. Almost everybody in the church there had a church background. They grew up in a church Christian family. They go into Sunday school. They knew all that stuff. I briefly said before, I'd gone to church until I was about 6 years old, but not since. And so I was ignorant. And I was confused. But I knew God had turned me around. And I knew I wanted to serve God with all my heart. Again, I was looking for the generic purpose of life in a secular way, and my calling, my specific calling, the will of God, particularly my calling in a particular way. So those are similar and parallel. I'll get much into those in the coming videos. In my whole life is shaped by that, those events and situations. I think suitable to mention here is I've had, since 23 years old, I had several times I got near death, at least 4 times in major ways. I didn't have a near-death experience like you go, you see the light, you come back up. I got really close to death, and each one's are long stories. But it made me wake up my mortality. It made me review my priorities and get with the program and what's most important. And it is about what's my purpose, what's my calling, get that done, because I'm not promised tomorrow. Right? That is just a cute bumper sticker saying. I've known that many times. So, blah, blah, blah. So there I am, new believer, and I vowed to God. I said, God, if I ever figure out Christianity with all these scraps of sermon here and lesson, essential class there, and a radio preacher there, if I figure this thing out, I promise I will teach the basics to new believers, because it was crazy for me. There's no such publication then. Today there are a few, and they're pretty good. I've seen them, but there's 0 then. And then, likewise, since then, I've grown a whole lot, because I'll tell you more later. I said, God, it's not just a new believer basics, ABCs, but the essential Bible doctrines, essential theology, the essentials of evangelism, the essentials of apologetics, the essentials of benevolence. I think that's horribly neglected. The essentials of spiritual warfare, Those are the big categories that I'll be teaching on in the coming years, not days or weeks, years, at least 3 years for me to get what's in my mind and heart and files online if I keep a pretty steady pace like I have been. That's a lot of stuff. And I'm not going to get, tell my stories, obviously, because I'm a storyteller, blah, blah. But I'm not going to go in details or particulars. And along the way, I've learned lots of wonderful teachers, especially online, like the Bible Project, like The Chosen, like I said, the Bible Hub, like there's several different apologetic ones. There's some theology ones, some church history ones. I'm going to link to those and say, go there. I've vetted those. They're good. They're legit. They're orthodox. I'm not going to lead you astray. But I never had that at church. I never had anyone recommend books. Well, a few people recommend a few books. I never said never. Very few people recommended books. And nobody recommended websites. All those have been prevalent since the year 2000. So I would recommend lots and lots and lots of websites for people to learn, because I want to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. I want them to grow up and become, feed themselves spiritually, if you will. And there's been times I've kind of, like Israel, Jacob fought with God, says, God, I just want to teach this stuff. I don't want to go into all these secular topics. There's so much richness and beauty in your word and in Christian thought, but God has not given me a green light. I get to do some of it, and a good portion of it in the long term. That's why I'm putting this aside here. Currently, I'm 72 years old. My grandfathers made it into their 80s. My father made it to 94, and he was well until his last year. I expect to see my 90th birthday being well and strong and productive. So I got about 20 years at least. And so I get a lot done in 20 years online and with the help of AI. And that's a whole different subject that I'll talk about later. I spend several hours a week studying about AI. I'm applying AI, I'm learning AI, and I want to learn much more about AI. That's a whole different thing for later. So things can unfold really fast once you know where you're going and what you want with the help of AI. Get back on track, Joe. Look at my notes. My first pastor recommended, and so I clearly want to serve God. I had an appointment, a meeting with the pastor, and he said, well, yeah, there is a certain Bible college down the road here from our church. Let you go there. A lot of the guys there in the church that want to become preachers, they go there. And I went, roger that. Here I go. I applied. I was accepted. What a concept. I attended class. Oh my gosh. And then I hit a major wall or drama requirement. Again, the guys that he had recommended had grew up in the church and they had a basis. I had none. And so I took my course in Old Testament survey, New Testament survey. It was all brand new to me. At the beginning of the class, the professor stood up and said, the Bible is full of myths, fairy tales, and legends. You can take or leave it. It's got some pretty good moral stories. So basically, I'm going to teach it as literature and not as a holy text. I was shocked because I've been constantly listening to Christian radio, and those preachers and teachers online would say anything close to that. And he wasn't a visiting professor. He was the head of the Christianity department. I had a psychology professor in class said, when she encounters a marriage that's on the rocks, she recommends that one of them, quote, have an affair to spice things up. I raised my hand. She called on me and I said, what about thou shalt not commit adultery? She said to me in class, is that in the Bible? I was silent. I was in shock for 2 to 3 days. I went to visit her in her office, and she patted me on the shoulder and said, I used to believe like you, and then I outgrew it. I told God, I'll finish this term, but I ain't coming back. They're teaching me and training me, preparing me to become a liberal, useless religious cog in some denominational wheels. They want me to just be, no. I want to become a man of God. I want training. I want discipleship. It ain't happening here. I ain't coming back. Now I'm going to tell you the kicker. Might as well tell the whole truth and shame the devil. Where I went was Houston Baptist University. It was a Southern Baptist institution. People that give their donations in the Southern Baptist churches were subsidizing my tuition. I had taken those things I'd heard to the dean, academic dean, and he said, oh yeah, we know that. And every 2 years they renew their contract. They signed a statement that says, we believe the Bible is the inerrant word of God. The next day they step in class and they're out of integrity. I said, okay, because the regents were trying to compete with liberal colleges and not with conservative colleges. The regents, the top dogs, knew that, and they were letting the professors offer this slop to the students. I said, no, God, I'm too tender, I'm too vulnerable, I'm too teachable, and I'm not going to become a religious clone talking all this religious foolishness. Goodbye. So, it's a good place in this section. Yippee. Into part C. Sunny North, how should we do this? Again, pray for me, please. Your best prayers, please. Now and later, please. I always want wisdom, please. May God guide me. Always ask for guidance and help and strength and wisdom. And as I'm going to put this on the internet, this and many more future videos, then it's really up to God to make the connection. Who sees it? Who doesn't see it? Are their heart prepared? Are they receptive? Did God create a divine appointment to where their toddler was taking a nap and their dog was barking all the time? To where somebody, they weren't getting notifications on their smartphone during my messages? There's a silence. God can do that kind of thing. And God can soften their hearts for days, weeks, months, or years so that what I have to say to them, and this is all autobiographical stuff. But when I get down in the weeds, get down in the nuts and bolts of Christianity, which I really, really, really want to go to, the devil's going to hate it. It's a spiritual warfare going on those days. And God's going to love it. And I'm going to tell people, like Bereans, go to the Bible, check me out. Tell me where I'm wrong based on the Bible. I'm pleased to be corrected. But if you ain't heard it before, that don't mean that it ain't truth. So, enough yapping there, John. Let's shut him down. Shalom. I like that word.